Hey Nibblings, it's Buggy Cass, your coffee aunt here again, and I've decided to celebrate the fact that I am back on my feet by immediately recording a new fic. This one is called Zutopia by Itslivybear, and it is a Nedzu fic where Izuku and Nedzu take over the world. Summary: Nedzu isn't fond of many humans, but he was rather fond of strategy games, one of which led him to meet a rather curious and interesting human with the username of Greenbean. He found himself looking forward to their games until one day he got the shocking realization that Green was not only a child, but a bullied one, and suddenly he had someone to protect. And if he taught the child how to take over the world in the process, well, he was Nedzu after all. Chapter 1. Nedzu sat back in his chair with a hum, eyes darting over the screen in amusement. He had always found chess rather boring, simple in its complexity, and after thoroughly trouncing every opponent in Japan, he had moved on to other strategy games, those certainly less common than something as ancient as chess. One such game he was rather fond of was terraforming Mars. As the name suggests, you start with the red planet with no oxygen, low temperature, and no water or greenery to speak of. Through the course of the game, using cards and your corporate abilities and specialties, you make an infrastructure to hopefully terraform the most of Mars and claim dominion over the planet. It can play several people, up to 5, but Nedzu always preferred a single-player or 2-player game, despite 3 players being the most popular. It was a card-based board game, which translated well to the online mode, and each game was different. Of course, certain strategies could be utilized in all games, but the corporation you represented it changed every game, and each had its own specialty and abilities. There were more in the expansions, of course, but some of the basic corporations were very exciting. For example, Ecolime lets you start with 2 plant production, 3 plant resources in hand, and 36 MC, or the game currency, at the start of the game. Furthermore, when placing a greenery tile, it cost you 7 plants instead of 8, like it would for most others. Since greenery tiles directly translate into victory points at the end of the game, this corporation will likely focus heavily on plant production and greenery. Another interesting one was Inventrix. You draw 3 cards for free at the start of the game, where otherwise you have to pay 3 MC per card, and you start with 45 MC. Whenever a card has a specific requirement, like having the oxygen above or below a certain level, or the temperature, or number of oceans, the requirements can be changed by +2 or -2 steps. Your choice. Surely handy for cards that have an explicit requirements. And you get starting cards besides. All in all, the game was different every time. Some things left entirely up to chance, and that was something that excited Nedzu like nothing else. Unlike in chess, where the most diversity you get is which side you play, terraforming Mars is different every round. No 2 games will be the same based on the luck of the draw for the cards, even if the players played exactly the same way every time. It was simply fascinating. Plus, Nedzu quite liked the idea of terraforming and owning a planet. Space travel had declined when Quirk first came along, so it was not something he was likely to have happen, but it was an entertaining idea. In addition, he supposed that being the principal of UA was a bit like terraforming a planet. Cultivate the right environment and all that. He felt he knew many of the people who often played, finding himself playing at the same time every day in hopes of meeting one specific player. More often than not, he did indeed find them. It was rare that people would end up in a match with him and not leave at this point, taking one look at his username, redacted, and disconnecting. Disheartening, sure, but there was one player, Greenbean, who always stayed, sending a hi with a smiley face in the in-game text chat. In all honesty, he wasn't that upset that people didn't play with him, because it meant he could go a few games with Greenbean instead, which was always a treat. Even if Nedzu won, the games were very close, and the other player always gave fun reactions to actions in the chat, which Nedzu couldn't help but indulge. The person was very smart, and Nedzu enjoyed the time at the end of the day, when schools and most work got out, when he got to play with them. After several months, Nedzu would posit they were friends, or at least friendly, having talked a few times about curious science topics, some related to the game, some not, when Greenbean asked a question out of the blue. Greenbean, can I ask you a question? Redacted. Of course. Greenbean, how do I get my classmates to stop hitting me? And Nedzu stopped. There were a few things wrong with that. One, this was a child. Someone still in school. He had guessed they were in late middle school or early high school, despite their intelligence, based on their manner of speaking. But to have it confirmed in perhaps the worst way made his heart stutter before he went into principal mode. Redacted. Why are they hitting you? Are the teachers doing nothing? Greenbean. I get in their way, I guess, and no, not really. Nedzu's face was carefully blank. Redacted. Green, them hitting you is not your fault. You know that, yes? Greenbean. Greenbean. If I didn't get in their way, if I was better at running, I'd probably be fine. Greenbean. It doesn't even hurt as much anymore, but I'm running out of things to tell my mom. His whiskers twitched. Redacted. Why aren't the teachers doing anything? Greenbean. Well, Greenbean. There was a pause. The game long since stalled. But Nedzu waited. Greenbean. I'm quirkless. Nedzu felt confusion at first. Quirkless? Certainly uncommon. But that meant this child, and there was the anger again, was frighteningly intelligent all on his own. Anger came shortly after that thought. How ridiculous! Humans would try to find any reason to beat others down, even those of their own kind, and this child was kind, intelligent, and curious, all traits Nedzu was constantly looking for in students. Greenbean. I understand if you don't want to play anymore. Greenbean. I should just keep to myself. Greenbean. I really like the games we did play. Nedzu pushed down his anger to reassure his gaming partner. Redacted. Why would I stop playing with you just because of something you cannot control? Redacted. In addition, you're one of the only ones who can go toe-to-toe with me, and that's without an intelligence quirk like mine. Very impressive, Green. He knew the quirkless statistics. It was part of the reason he had lifted the ban on quirkless students, hoping that if UA led the charge, other high schools would stop the discrimination for a subset of people who were just as capable and arguably far less of a liability than most people. His snout twitched in amusement as the child immediately latched onto his quirk. Quirks had been a favorite topic of them both, but they had thus far avoided talking about their own. Still, Greenbean had revealed their status. It was only fair Nedzu did the same. Plus, it effectively got the child off the spiral of negative self-worth, no doubt enforced in their school. Greenbean. Oh, wow, that's pretty rare. Greenbean. And it makes a lot of sense. You're really good at this game. Greenbean. There aren't many heroes with an intelligence quirk, but I know Nedzu, the principal of UA, is one, and he's really cool. Greenbean. Does it speed up your mental process or make you better at retaining information? Greenbean. Oh, does it give you multitasking abilities? I know current research says most people can't really actually multitask effectively, so that'd be a really cool quirk. But it would probably require multiple processing systems since the human brain isn't designed to handle multiple thought processes simultaneously. Redacted. There are actually other heroes with intelligence-based quirks, but it technically does all of those things. Redacted. Perhaps not the multitasking. As you said, it's not very effective. But my thoughts are indeed very fast, and I am rather good at retaining information. Greenbean. That's so cool! What do you call it? Nedzu smiled to himself. Redacted. High specs, of course. Greenbean. Well, that's the name of Nedzu's. Do you have the same quirk as him? Redacted. I certainly hope so. Redacted. After all, I am him. He chuckled, glad to have gotten off the topic of the bullying, even if he would likely go back to it eventually, as Greenbean typed, then deleted, then typed, then deleted, and Nedzu was more than patient with the response. Greenbean, and this is just a series of interrobangs. Greenbean. You're Nedzu? Greenbean. Wait, is this a prank? Nedzu's heart fell. Redacted. I can assure you it is not. If you would like, you can send me an email, and I will reply with a code word of your choosing. Greenbean. Wait, are you sure? Redacted. Perfectly. Nedzu's, or I suppose my, email is public knowledge on the UA website. Make the subject of your email your favorite corporation, perhaps. Greenbean. Okay. Oh, code word is, Greenbean. Katsudon! Nedzu smiled and tabbed out of the game, opening his email and refreshing every few seconds until he got an email from one smallmite08 at mail.yahoo.co.jp with the subject line of Terractor, an Earth-based corporation. The message was simply, hello, and nothing more. And he was quick to send back the given code word with a smiley face, tabbing back into the game as soon as it sent. Redacted. Sent. Smile. Greenbean. Key smash. Greenbean. You're really Nedzu? Greenbean. I've been talking to Nedzu? Greenbean. I've been playing games with Nedzu! Redacted. And won several, too. Greenbean. Oh, holy moly, I've beaten Nedzu before! Greenbean. And a strategy game! Greenbean. Okay, I can die happy now. Greenbean. Thank you, Nedzu sir, for playing games with me. I know you're probably pretty busy. Redacted. Nonsense. I look forward to meeting you on the battlefield every evening. Smile. Greenbean. Oh, jeez, I play video games with the principal of UA almost every day. Greenbean. Hang on, I'm gonna need a minute. Redacted. On a different topic, Terractor is your favorite corporation? Greenbean. Oh yeah, I like playing Earth cards anyway, so getting a cost reduction on them is nice. Plus it's like an homage to home, right? Redacted. Quite right. I imagine the 60 starting cash doesn't hurt either. Greenbean. Oh, no, it gives me a flexibility early game. Greenbean. If not, I like Ecoline. Redacted. Ah, that would have been my guess, from your name. You seem to favor greenery and oceans rather than cities. Greenbean. Yeah, I guess I do. Redacted. Tell me, Green, you know who I am. What can I call you? Redacted. Unless you'd rather I go with Green, like usual. Or, perhaps, Small Mite? Winky face. Greenbean. Key smash. I forgot that was my email address. Crying face. Greenbean. You can call me Izuku. Greenbean. If you want to. Redacted. Of course, Izuku. And, of course, you can call me Nedzu. Redacted. Now, shall we finish this game? Greenbean. Oh yeah, let's! Nedzu smiled, tabbing out briefly to put in a request with the police for any files they had on a quirkless boy named Izuku. He was not going to let the question from earlier go unpunished for whoever put down this kind, smart child. There would be hell to pay. Izuku was freaking out, even as he placed another greenery tile. He thought. Nedzu was right. I do place a lot of greenery. God, Nedzu. He had been playing with Nedzu all this time. Sure, looking back, Redacted was a great player. The best he had ever found at his tender age of 8. Having played the game for a few months now, and the name fit the cryptid principal of the most prestigious high school in Japan, especially since no one really knew what he was, species-wise, and he refused to confirm anything, seemingly reveling in the confusion. He wasn't sure what had made him ask the question. Sure, he was getting bullied at school. That was a fact he was slowly starting to accept, no matter how much Kachan had been his friend not 4 years ago. As soon as Izuku was revealed to really be quirkless, that went out the window. He guessed it was because Kachan and the others had started using their quirks on him. It hadn't even been as bad before. Sure, it hurt. He had been lying when he told Nedzu it didn't even hurt as much before. But he was running out of things to tell his mom. Cuts and bruises were one thing. He could pass those off as being clumsy or playing too rough. But burns and minor stab wounds. The kid who could elongate his fingers discovered recently that if he grew his fingers really fast, they had a chance to puncture skin. Only about a 1/4 centimeter deep, but still enough to draw blood like he was stabbed by a particularly vicious pencil. Were much harder to explain away. For now, he just tried to hide them, and the bullies were smart enough to avoid his face. But he had thought that his smart and kind friend would maybe be able to help him. He should have known he'd ask questions. They always did before they found out he was worthless and deserved it. But then Nedzu said he didn't. He said it wasn't Izuku's fault, which didn't make sense. At the age of 6, his teachers had inadvertently reinforced what Kachan had been telling him. Quirkless is useless, and he deserved it. After all, why else would the teachers look the other way, or even go as far as to scold Izuku for riling up the other kids? It was his fault. But Nedzu was really smart. Arguably the smartest person in Japan, if not the world. So he probably knew what he was talking about. He definitely believed what he said, for sure. Unless it was a prank. But no, why would it be a prank? Nedzu had humored him rambling about his quirk when he knew Nedzu was quirkless. Had even finished the game and offered to play another one besides. That wasn't something someone would do, right? Sure, people had pretended to be his friend before, but he had proof that this was indeed Nedzu. Because he doubted even the best hacker could pretend to send an email from Nedzu's own. But he wouldn't even get to see Izuku's face when he revealed it was all a trick, since he didn't know anything about him, really. Wait. He knew his name and quirk status. Was that enough for someone to find him? Probably not just any random person, but this was Nedzu they were talking about. Almost nothing seemed impossible for the principal of UA. So maybe he'd find him just to tell him what everyone else did. Sure seemed like a lot of trouble to go through for some random kid, but then again, Izuku had been playing TM with him for months at this point. Time Nedzu was never going to get back. But he had called Izuku one of the only people who could go toe-to-toe with him, which was insanely flattering. Sure, he didn't win often, but he won every once in a while, and he imagined the feeling was what having friends would be like. Pure euphoria. Maybe he could actually get a friend this time. And if it happened to be the principal of UA and his gaming friend, then no one could really fault him for that. Chapter 2. An Offer You Can't Refuse. Inko liked to think she was a good parent. When she got pregnant, she started taking more hours in preparation for the time she wouldn't be able to work when raising her child. When she gave birth 2 weeks early and her baby boy had to spend some time in the intensive care unit, She stayed by his side, reading him stories and getting herself healthy so she'd be ready to take care of him when they could take him home. When he was healthy enough to come home and interact with the world, she got in contact with her friend Mitsuki again and arranged play dates for their sons, ensuring he'd grow up with a friend. When he'd fallen in love with heroes and All Might, she bought him toys and played videos for him and pretended to be in danger just so he could save her. When he'd been diagnosed quirkless, she'd apologized. Clearly something was wrong with her, because nothing could be wrong with her baby. When Hisashi left, she stayed. She knew that wasn't enough, of course. She knew she wasn't enough when her baby's entire world came crashing down with one doctor's visit. But she was so lost. She wasn't like Mitsuki. She wasn't like Masaru. And she certainly wasn't like Hisashi. She was just Inko. And she felt like that wasn't enough. It wasn't enough the first time her baby had come home all bruised and scratched up. He told her he was simply clumsy while playing, and she chose to believe him, pushing away the fact that he had never come home this beaten up before. Not before the diagnosis. It wasn't enough when the light slowly left his eyes and he got quieter and quieter. He used to talk and talk and talk all the time without stopping. Now he would catch himself and stop, sitting in silence and staring off into space, lost in his head. It wasn't enough when he finally stopped trying to play outside and asked her to help him set up a Steam account, which was a gaming client, apparently. It would let him play any number of games if he wanted to, so that he could interact with people over the internet instead of in person. That way, they could only hurt him with words he could mute if he needed to. There, people could see her baby being brilliant, and they never had to know he was quirkless. Of course, he didn't always play multiplayer games. He played one game she found rather cute, Stardew Valley, and he was quick to show her all the lovely people of the town. He got so excited when one of the characters would send him a recipe, and he loved to give them gifts. "Look, Mommy," he had said one day, pointing at one of the characters. "It's you! Her name is Jody. She has 2 sons and her husband is gone, but she's really nice. She invited me to dinner pretty early, and she's always doing her best." Inko had smiled softly. Jody did seem very nice. She had 2 boys of her own, both with rather crazy hair, much like her baby. Color Vincent's hair green, make it a little curlier, and it was just like him. She noticed him getting happier as time went on. He would come home from school, no doubt hiding a new injury that if she saw he would laugh off and make up an excuse for. And he would play games until dinner. After, he would help with the dishes and chat about how much fun he'd had, sometimes thanking her again for letting him get an account. And she would smile and say, of course, like it didn't break her heart every time he came home with a new bruise. And then one day she noticed the burns. She hadn't wanted to consider that Mitsuki's child had been one of the ones to latch onto her baby's quirklessness and equate it to uselessness, being one of his bullies and attackers. They had been such good friends growing up, but she had started to notice things when they'd go over for dinner, things the boy, and no doubt, tried to hide from her. That meant he knew it was wrong, that hurting her baby wasn't something he should do. So maybe he wouldn't. Maybe he'd stop. But no one else at his school had a fire-based quirk. Inko had checked. In the entire school, no one could burn her baby except Katsuki, someone who was supposed to be his friend. She had to accept the reality that not only was her baby getting bullied, getting hurt, but he wasn't telling her about it. She didn't point out the burns. He didn't either. She ached for him to tell her, to trust her. But he just smiled and said school was fine. She wasn't enough. She didn't know if she ever would be. Nedzu hummed in delight, sipping his tea as he walked the halls of UA with a file in hand. He barely noticed people scurrying out of the way, looking terrified that their diminutive principal was humming and smiling as he read the file once more. On one hand, he was even more livid than before. Midoriya Izuku, age 8. Quirkless, living in Mustafu with his mother and attending Aldera Elementary. To think that an 8-year-old was being bullied over something as inconsequential as to whether or not he had a quirk was almost enough for his grip on his teacup to tighten just enough to snap the handle off. But the tea-quirk was spared by how, on the other hand, he was very excited. Midoriya Izuku, age 8. Quirkless, and one of the smartest humans he had ever come across. At age 8. Most of his 14 to 18-year-old students were not as clever as Izuku was, and Nedzu was delighted with the prospect of getting to know him and hone his mind to even greater heights, should the boy wish to. Hopefully, he could convince the boy's mother that homeschooling really was his best option. And of course, Nedzu would be happy to take on the role of teacher. Really, many of his principal duties could be automated to a degree that would give him ample time to teach Izuku all the ways that humans tick and how to use that to his advantage. Maybe he'd start a bit smaller, but all in good time, of course. He peeked into one of the rooms and smiled again. Ah, Aizawa, just the man I was looking for. I wanted to let you know that I'm going off campus and have a note on my door saying all questions and complaints should go to you. I just thought I'd let you know ahead of time. The underground hero's eyes widened slightly, and he started to say, Nedzu, wait. Like that would stop him when he was on a mission. And Nedzu smiled again before closing the door, completely aware of the chaos he had just unleashed on the poor man's class. Eraserhead had just started working for him, along with 2 of his classmates, Yamada Hizashi, better known as Present Mike, and Kayama Namuri, better known as Midnight. And already he was proving Nedzu right. One of the certainly more tolerable humans, to be perfectly honest. Plus, he was harsh and a little vindictive, something Nedzu thrived in. But still, that was only enough for Nedzu to give him a heads up that he was essentially in charge at the tender age of 23. Definitely the youngest member of the staff. Oh well, a few hours probably won't kill him. He had a person to find. Izuku was tired. It had been another day at school, just like all the rest, but today it just made him tired. He felt the ache deep in his bones, though his injuries were only skin deep, and he barely noticed anything on his walk home. His arms stung, and he tried to keep them steady, locking up his elbows and keeping a death grip on the yellow straps of his backpack. The less he jostled them, the less it hurt, after all. The day had gone painfully slowly, but it was finally over. He could just play games until dinner like always, avoiding his mother's questions like a seasoned pro. No more Kachan, no more goons, no more teachers looking the other way, no more getting in trouble for things he either didn't do or couldn't do, or things he was in fact the victim of. Sometimes he wished he didn't have to go to school. The morning had been particularly bad, with his desk absolutely covered in marker. The teacher had made him clean it off, and he had lunch detention for vandalizing school property, despite the fact that the teacher had been in the room before Izuku and watched him see the words for the first time. Kacham had pushed his food on the ground, making it inedible, and because of the lunch detention, he couldn't stay out of the classroom until last minute, like he usually did. So everyone got 5 minutes of how much damage can we do and before Deku cries. Turns out, not a lot. It didn't seem to stop them, though. Kacchan had burned his worksheet again, so he had nothing to turn in at the end of class, earning him another 0. And then he had grasped his arm during PE, pretending to help him up when he was the one who tripped him in the first place. Clumsy Deku, he scoffed, hand burning. You keep fucking tripping. One of these days you'll snap your neck on the way down. A little morbid for an 8-year-old to say. He had probably heard it somewhere or seen it on TV. He probably didn't grasp the concept that it would likely kill Izuku. Not even Kacchan wanted that. No one had quite gotten bold enough to literally tell him to die. He knew it was coming, though. He'd read enough forum posts from other quirkless people to know it was just a matter of time. He really hoped it didn't come for a good long while. He reached his apartment listlessly, pausing to scrounge his face into a smile and checking to make sure his wounds were all covered before opening the door and stepping inside. "I'm home." "Oh, Izuku," he heard his mom from the living room as he toed off his shoes. "You have a visitor, sweetie." He paused. That couldn't be right. "A guest?" he muttered, brow furrowed even as he walked further into the apartment, rounding the corners of the living room and freezing. "Oh, hello, Izuku. Your mother makes lovely tea. Did you know that?" He could feel his brain rebooting as he just stared, not even blinking. He vaguely registered his backpack falling from his hand to the ground with a thud. He opened and closed his mouth a few times, and his mother chuckled. "Izuku, aren't you going to greet your guest?" Izuku blinked once more, taking in the white rodent in a suit calmly sipping tea on their couch, and promptly passed out. Nedzu set down his teacup gently as Inko immediately shot to her feet, completely flustered. Entirely understandable, as her child has just slammed his head onto the floor. He had expected some reaction, of course, but nothing this extreme to be certain. Izuku passing out did not enter into the realm of possibilities when Nedzu had pictured how this meeting would go. Then, when Inko grabbed his arms to lift him up, he hissed, coming back awake from pain, that Nedzu, perhaps, understood how it had come to this, and was reasonably upset. He only wanted to burn down one building. That seemed completely reasonable. That it happened to be Aldera Elementary for convenience, and nothing else. Inko hurriedly guided her son, and he certainly was tiny, to the couch before rushing off to get a first aid kit, and Nedzu hopped down, making his way over. "I'm sorry for startling you, Izuku. Are you all right? Did you hit your head?" Green Eyes blinked at him before the boy shook his head, seemingly incredibly shy now that there wasn't a screen in the way. Nedzu gently patted the boy on his knees. "Excellent. Head injuries are always the worst. Here's your mother with the first aid kit." "Izuku," she blubbered. "What happened, baby?" He looked away, trying to smile. "It's nothing. I just tripped during PE and scraped my arms on the ground." She fussed over him until he reluctantly took off his uniform top, revealing angry red burns. Borderline 2nd degree, but not quite there yet. Both adults stilled. "Izuku," she said gently, eyes brimming with tears again. "Those aren't scrapes." He winced as she dabbed on burn cream. "It's nothing, really, I'm fine." Nedzu climbed onto the couch next to him. "You must be wondering why I'm here, or how I found you in the first place." Izuku blinked at the sudden topic change, but Nedzu merely smiled, unperturbed. "I mean," the small boy started, "you're Nedzu, and you had my name. I figure if you really wanted to find me, you could." So I did. I do greatly enjoy our time together, and I will admit I was rather worried after our conversation a few days ago, so I came up a plan that I think will rather benefit us both. Izuku merely blinked at him. I have already informed your mother, of course, in our lovely chat over tea in the hour before you arrived. I assumed the best time to catch you would be our usual gaming time, but wanted to meet your mother beforehand, and I must say she is a lovely woman. Inko blushed bashfully, turning away even as she put away the first aid kit, and he smiled to himself. Of course, that wasn't the only reason he came early. If he was being bullied at school, Nedzu wanted to ensure he was safe at home. He could assume, of course, with the ability to play computer games, that he at least had some measure of freedom. However, you could also play computer games while locked in your room. So Nedzu had wanted to be sure he wouldn't have to immediately claim this child as a ward of UA. Luckily, Inko was lovely, if a bit overwhelmed by virtue of being a single parent. And what would that be, sir? Come now, we're friends, no need for that. But yes, I was wondering if you'd like to be homeschooled instead of attending public school. Izuku's eyes immediately welled up with tears, but he managed to pause them when he frowned in confusion. But Mum isn't a teacher. Would I be taking classes online instead? Ah, no, I was wondering if you'd like to be my personal student. The boy blanched, mouth gaping like a fish, and Nedzu smiled to himself. But you're Nedzu! Yes, and you're Izuku. He shook his head rapidly, green curls bouncing and hands waving fervently. No, I mean, you're the principal of UA. I can't just be taught by you. And yet, I am offering. Nedzu was practically beaming at this point, forcing his tail not to wag and his feet not to swing. He was giddy at the prospect, but best to stay professional and calm if he could help it. Inko placed a hand on his shoulder, carefully avoiding the burn she had treated. Sweetie, I think it would be good for you. Plus, he's the smartest hero, like you always say. And you've always wanted to go to UA, even if it was a little later. He looked up at his mother in shock. You think I should go? She nodded and sniffed. I know you don't always tell me everything, but I also know that school it's not kind to you, Izuku. You're most happy when you're playing your games. And I know most of the stories you've told me at dinner in these last few months have been about one specific player, and he's currently sitting on our couch. Nedzu cooed to himself. Ah, tales of their battles at the dinner table. It was incredibly endearing. He supposed that if he had someone he regularly talked to, he would also talk about the clever plays either he or his opponent had come up with. Izuku bit his lip and looked at Nedzu with wide green eyes. Are you sure? Nedzu smiled. Of course. Then I would like that very much, please. Excellent. We can start tomorrow. Back at UA, Aizawa Shoda felt a shiver go down his spine. Notes. Love that look for them. Nedzu really winced. I'm gonna show up unannounced. Grin. Feels like something he would do. I know I don't always read the notes, but that one was funny. Chapter 3. A Game of Liars. Izuku found himself on a train, heading towards UA, backpack in hand. It had always been his dream to go to UA one day, as a student no less, because it was the best hero school ever. Even All Might went there. He had assumed, however, that this would happen later, when he was 14, and this was his high school. But here he was, age 8, and yes, technically a student here. He looked up at the 8-shaped building and walked through the gate with a deep breath. Nedzu had given him a pass so the gate wouldn't lock him out, but other than that, had not given the boy directions. It'll be a fun puzzle. All you have to do is find my office. Worry not, it won't be difficult for you, and the staff does know you're coming. It would be fine. Kayama Namuri had a free block in the morning. so she used it to plan her lessons, like any responsible teacher would. If she happened to not get much done, it was because it was first thing in the morning, so really, who could blame her? She stepped outside to go to the bathroom with a sigh before she bumped into something that barely came up to her knees. She blinked and looked down, seeing a small child. "Oh, hello there, little guy. How'd you get in here?" If security had failed so that a random child could walk into UA, someone was going to die. "Oh, hello, Miss Midnight." Wait, he recognized her. What the hell? "I walked? I had the pass so the gates didn't close." "How'd you get a pass, kiddo?" "Nedzu gave it to me." "What? Why would Nedzu give a pass to this tiny child?" "Wait a minute." She paled and swallowed. How old are you, sweetheart?" He blinked up at her, shy. I'm 8, Miss Midnight." Sweet Lord. Nedzu's personal student was fucking 8 years old. The rest of the staff needed to be informed before it was too late. Maybe they could still get the kid out before it was too late and the rat corrupted his mind. They did not need another Nedzu running around. And this kid looked really sweet. Can you help me find his office? He never said I couldn't ask for help." Nope, it really was too late. She couldn't not take the kid to Nedzu at this point. He definitely had eyes on the situation and would know if she tried to defy him. God, they were all gonna die. "Of course." She tried to smile cheerily. "You just come with me, hun." He smiled, and her heart melted a little. Maybe Nedzu couldn't corrupt this pure kiddo. Maybe they'd be fine. Thank you, Kayama." He greeted her before the door was even fully open, and she watched the green boy light up at the sight of the rat. "Wonderful to see you, Izuku. And you made such good time. Good use of your resources." The boy, Izuku, smiled bashfully and bowed at her. "Thank you, Miss Midnight." She smiled. "Of course." She turned to go, but the rat stopped her. And Kayama, perhaps keep all rumors of my student to yourself. I think everyone should have the chance to meet Izuku themselves without previous bias." "They're already biased," she screamed internally, "because he's your personal student. You just want to revel in the reactions at seeing how young this kid is and be even more terrified." "Sure thing, boss," she said out loud. God, this was going to be a nightmare. She couldn't even tell anyone so they could share in her pain. As the door closed behind the pro-hero, Nezu's whiskers twitched in amusement. He could see her bewilderment and distress, of course. He had a relative idea of what was running through her head, but it was very amusement to watch her on cameras when she realized exactly why Izuku was there. "Wonderful. I trust the train ride was uneventful." The boy nodded. "Good. No complications, then." "Well, now, I do have to technically teach you the curriculum for your year, but I know you favor science, yes? Quirk science, specifically?" Izuku nodded rapidly, eyes sparkling. "Yeah!" Have you looked into the study of psychology at all?" That's the study of the brain, right?" Nedzu grinned. "Correct. Imagine if you had an understanding of how the human brain works. It might assist in your quirk study endeavors. Of course, we could always learn the basic school stuffs, but it's up to you." The boy blinked, contemplative. It would be neat." Nedzu sat back in his chair. "How about this? We can try a lesson, and if you like it, we could continue." Izuku brightened and nodded. "Okay." "Excellent. First, we will learn about the different areas of the brain." Izuku very much liked psychology, he found. It was just so fascinating to learn about the different components of the brain and how they all work together. For example, at the back of his head, he had his occipital lobe that took the information from his eyes and figured out what he was seeing by talking to the other centers in his brain. But What if I was blind? Izuku asked. Then my eyes aren't sending any information. Ah, excellent question. Which brings us to a new topic. Neuroplasticity. Apparently, when you're really young, your brain was just figuring out how it was going to work and devoting areas of the brain to specific things. That's why people were only considered fully mature around the age of 25. That was when their brains stopped figuring themselves out. Because it was still figuring out how to do things, it had a pretty high plasticity, or ability to change. If someone lost half their brain, for example, the other half would adapt to compensate for that loss. In the case of blind people, the whole occipital lobe was appropriated for other things based on what that person was likely to need help on. What are some of the things a blind person might need to be better at? Nedzu's question made perfect sense to Izuku. Blind people would need to be able to hear better, like bats, maybe touch better, since they read with their fingers, which had always seemed rather hard to Izuku. Indeed, Nedzu had smiled. There are often more neurons in the occipital lobe devoted to a blind person's sense of touch, and sometimes their sense of hearing to help them perceive the world better. Very good, Izuku. And boy, if every lesson with Nedzu was like that, he would always want to come back. Psychology and the brain were so interesting to learn about. The idea that Izuku could lose half his brain right now and he would probably be okay because he was still young was flabbergasting and exciting. Now, how do you feel about board games? Izuku blinked. Oh, sure, I don't really mind either way. Excellent, come with me. He slid a box off the shelf behind his desk and walked out of the office, Izuku trailing behind. He was taller than the principal, but not by much, so he had no trouble keeping up. They went back to the place Miss Midnight had found him, and Nedzu walked in, Izuku having no choice to follow, even as he recognized the teacher's lounge. Ah, Aizawa, ectoplasm. Wonderful! You don't have class right now. Could I impress you for a game with me and Izuku? Izuku looked at ectoplasm in wonder. Sure, he knew UA only employed heroes as teachers, especially after seeing Miss Midnight. But to see another one in the flesh, he felt like he was going to vibrate out of his skin. But he managed to contain himself and offer a shy wave. The other man, Aizawa, didn't look nearly as familiar, but he sighed. This is your personal student, then? Yes, this is Izuku. Hello, Aizawa, sir. Kid, I am definitely not old enough to be a sir. Anyway, it depends on the game. Ah, this isn't one I've had you play before. Don't worry. This will be new to everyone. In fact, even I have only read the rules. Ectoplasm sighed. Sir, that is more than enough for you. But something tells me I don't really get to say no. You would be correct. He hopped up on the table in the back room, and Izuku sat himself nearby as Nedzu opened the box and started taking out cards and stuff. The game is called Sheriff of Nottingham. It's based somewhat on the old Robin Hood stories, and the goal is simple. We are each merchants trying to get our goods to market. Our goods options are apples, cheese, breads, and chicken, and then, of course, contraband. The sheriff role will rotate between us, and everyone else will put their cards in their bags. You declare what's in your bag, all legal, of course, and the sheriff will determine if you can go to market or if he wants to search your bag. If you indeed have what you say you have, the sheriff has to pay you the penalty coins for every card he was wrong about, and you go to market. If he was right, and you don't have what you said you have, then you pay him the penalty gold for every card that's contraband, and must discard them. The penalty coins are listed in red on the bottom of the cards. 2 for regular goods, and 4 for contraband. You can also bribe the sheriff to not check your bag, and then you go free. The deals are binding, and only if money exchanges hands, and future promises are not held accountable. Are there any questions?
Yes, Aizawa said. What's this on the side of the player mats?
Ah, Nedzu purred. Those are the endgame bonuses. The winner in the end is determined by who has the most money, after all, and the goods you successfully brought to market are sold. There's a bonus for having the most and second most of any given good, including the contraband versions of the goods. You'll notice that chickens, which are worth 4 gold apiece, have the lowest bonus for having the most, whereas apples, worth 2 gold each, have the highest bonus to even things out.
How many cards can you take to market at once?
Each player has 6 cards in their hand. They can exchange or to discard or drop piles, but you can only take 5 cards to market.
Izuku swallowed nervously.
What does the sheriff do when the other players are picking out what to take to market?
Nedzu grinned.
Watching for hints, of course. If you watch someone pick up 3 apples, for example, and they say they are bringing 4 cheese, you know that's ridiculous and can search their bag and take their money.
Izuku nodded slowly.
When you bribe the sheriff, does it have to be with money?
The principal's grin sharpened.
Ah, no, you don't. You can promise things in your bag or your stall. Of course, if you promise a contraband from your bag and you bring none to market, then you do not have to pay, seeing as there was no contraband in your bag.
Aizawa raised his eyebrow at his question, and he ducked his head with a blush. It made sense that if you ran out of money, you could pay in goods. So why couldn't you pay in goods otherwise?
If there are no more questions, I believe we can start.
They were each dealt 6 of the cards, the rest going into a draw pile with 3 face up in a stack on either side of for the discard piles. Ectoplasm was the first sheriff. Izuku had 2 chicken, an apple, and 3 contraband. Silk, worth 8 gold, and 2 pepper, worth 6. Both of the discard piles had nothing but cheese and bread, so he took out the apple, discarded it, and drew from the top of the deck. Another apple. Nedzu went next, taking both the apple and 2 cards from the top of the deck, discarding 2 contraband, pepper and mead worth 8, and another cheese, placing the cheese underneath the contraband to discourage people from taking it. Aizawa ignored that and took both contraband, discarding 2 bread.
And now, Nedzu hummed, we place our goods in our bags. As soon as they are snapped shut, you can no longer remove the items inside until you are either searched or sent to market.
Izuku worried his lip as he watched Nedzu put 4 cards into the bag. Aizawa putting 3. 2 chickens didn't seem like enough, even for his first turn. Wait, it was the first turn. He eyed the 3 red cards in his hand and blinked. Ah, he had a plan. He snapped the bag shut, placing the rest of his hand on the table and looking expectantly at Ectoplasm, that round sheriff. He looked at Izuku first, narrowing his eyes. I have 3 chickens. Nedzu piped up next.
4 apples.
3 cheese. I can do this in any order, correct?
Oh yes, you don't have to go in turn order.
Ectoplasm wasted no time. Aizawa, there is no way. You didn't even take the cheese beneath the contraband. Show me your bag. Aizawa wordlessly handed it over, face completely blank, as Ectoplasm snapped it open, taking out the cards inside. 3 cheese. I believe you owe me 6 gold, Ecto. The cloning hero didn't say a word, handing over 6 of his starting 50 gold, and Aizawa wordlessly slipped 3 cheese by his player mat. Ecto glanced at Izuku once more before turning to Nedzu, sitting serenely and sipping tea. None of them were quite certain when he'd gotten, and he nervously looked at the bag. 4 apples, you say?
Yes.
Ectoplasm considered it before he sighed. I really can't read you. Go ahead to market.
Oh, you don't want to check my bag? 4 apples is a lot.
Yeah, no, I'm good. Thanks. Nedzu smiled and unsnapped his bag, carefully laying out 4 apples on his tableau.
A wise decision. You wouldn't want to be 8 gold poorer, after all.
Izuku was the last one, and he looked up at the hero, completely nervous. 3 chickens, you said?
Yes, Mr. Ectoplasm, sir?
He could feel the hero searching his eyes, but he didn't dare look away. Yeah, whatever. I hate that I had to go first. Go to market, kid. Izuku silently smiled softly and snapped open his bag. He slid 3 face-down cards to the top of his tableau, where contraband goes. Ectoplasm and Aizawa both did a double take, but Nedzu just cackled.
Oh, yes, he murmured around his tea, looking at his completely innocent-looking student. This will be quite fun.
Nedzu ended up winning the game, to no one's surprise. Between him and Izuku, they had most of the contraband, putting their scores much higher than either Aizawa or Ectoplasm. Ectoplasm found himself in last, Aizawa barely scraping by. But Izuku didn't think the man minded at all much, since he looked really tired of everything. Izuku was sad he only came in second, but it was his first time playing, and he didn't know much about what he was doing. He had discovered he wasn't the best at reading people, so his times as sheriff were awful. But people also didn't expect him to be lying every time, and when he developed a pattern, he switched it up, and only brought the completely legal goods to market. The time he declared he had 5 chickens had been very exciting, since having 5 cards to bring to market at once was rare, and he made a cool 10 gold when Aizawa decided to check him on it. He got caught a few times by Nedzu, of course, but the exhilarating feeling of slipping contraband past his mentor was incredible. Ectoplasm was an easy mark. Aizawa less so, but Nedzu was practically a fortress, so he would take any victories he could get, no matter how small.
How did you like the game?
Nedzu asked when they were back in the office to wrap up the day. It was fun. I liked the bribery aspect because it was a lot of weighing pros and cons and seeing how much money you can get out of people. But sneaking in contraband made me feel like I was getting away with something. He giggled, remembering the shocked look on Ectoplasm's face that first round when he'd slipped 3 contraband out at once, not even having anything legal. One of his favorite things to do was to pick up 2 or 3 of a card and then declare them when his whole bag was actually full of contraband. It was even better when it worked 2 or 3 rounds in a row, since clearly he must have the cheese in his bag this time. There's no way he drew more contraband. He definitely did. A well-placed sigh after drawing from the deck served his purpose as well. It was quiet enough that it wasn't obvious, but loud enough that everyone probably heard it. A sigh on drawing meant all your cards were mismatched, and that meant you'd probably only have a small haul this time. 2 apples, clearly. Not a crossbow and silk, the 2 best contraband in the game, aside from royal goods, at 9 and 8 gold respectively. Clearly not.
I'm glad you enjoyed it, Nedzu hummed, sipping his tea once more. We might only play games like that once a week, so you can get to know the other staff and practice against people who are not me. But it would be lovely to play different games with you. Ah, but it is time for you to catch the train home, isn't it?
Izuku jumped, looking at the time.
Oh, yes it is. See you tomorrow, Nedzu-sensei.
Nedzu waved goodbye to his pupil, and Izuku bounded out the door, dragging his backpack with him as he hurried to the station.
He'd have so much to tell his mom.
In an elementary school across town, an angry blonde boy glared at the empty desk. Where the hell was the nerd? Chapter 4. A simple game of cards. another week of learning, alternating lessons with further study of the brain. Technically, when I'm telling you of structure and function, it's not really psychology, but neuroscience. But I do find it a good basis. And regular schooling, Nedzu cleared a space on his deck and cleared out a deck of cards. Now, he said, this will not be something that is purely skill-based, and it doesn't require much manipulation. But it does help with logic and making decisions based on limited information. Izuku nodded eagerly as the principal dealt them each 6 cards, placing the other in a draw pile and flipping one over to form the discard. Please arrange your 6 cards like so, and do not look at them. Izuku watched as he arranged the cards into 2 rows of 3 and followed suit. Now, pick any column and flip them face up. He revealed an 8 and an ace of clubs, Nedzu revealing a 6 of hearts and a 3 of spades. The concept of the game is simple. Your goal is to arrange your cards in a way that minimizes the value of the cards until all 6 are revealed. Number cards are, of course, worth their value. Face cards are worth 10. Kings are worth 0. And 4s are negative. In addition, if any column has the same number, 2 queens, 2 sevens, etc., they negate each other, and that column is worth 0 points. This also includes the 4s, so do be careful, Izuku. The rat chuckled, straightening his cards. I believe this is, perhaps, best learned through playing. Since I don't, why don't you go first? You can either draw the face-up card and replace one of your own with it, discarding said card, or you can take a chance and draw from the top of the deck. However, if you do not place the card you draw and instead discard it, you must flip over one of your cards. Whenever you are ready, my friend. Izuku blinked and inspected the card that was currently face up. It was a 6 of diamonds, not particularly helpful for him, so he decided to draw from the top of the deck. 6 of clubs. He sighed, looking at his 6 cards, 4 face down, and went to discard the card. But then he stopped, looking at Nedzu's card. Nedzu was showing a 6. If Nedzu discarded this 6, he was basically giving him a free 0. He looked back at the 6 in his hands. He'd have to use it. Hesitantly, wanting to reveal more cards, but praying he wasn't about to give Nedzu something useful, he replaced the card next to the ace, or bottom middle, and replaced the 6, flipping the card into the discard pile. He breathed a sigh of relief at the 7 of clubs. Ah, rather clever, and a lucky draw. There aren't many cards below a 6, but enough to be scary, Nedzu drew the next card from the top of the deck and hummed before tossing it into the discard pile. Apparently he didn't want a 5 of clubs, but he turned over his own bottom middle card, revealing the Queen of clubs. My, we do have a lot of clubs out so early. Your turn. Izuku hummed. He didn't want the 5 either, so he drew from the top of the deck, hoping he didn't get an 8 or an ace. His heart sank. Jack of diamonds. Well, with cards to spare and no desire to keep a face card other than a king, he discarded it, flipping over the last of his bottom cards, revealing the 8 of hearts. Nedzu was equally not keen on picking up the jack, so he drew from the top of the deck. His whiskers flipped in delight as he slipped the card under a 6, discarding that and revealing the 3 of hearts. Oh, lucky! Indeed! Izuku drew a card from the top of the deck again. His eyes widened. The 4 of hearts! He looked down at his cards, worrying his lip over what he should replace. He could go for another of his face-down cards, but then he'd be 1 away from ending the game, with plenty of points to his name, and he might be giving up something good. He could replace one of the cards below his 2 remaining face-down cards, but there was the possibility that one of them was also a 4, and that would negate their usefulness. Resolutely, he replaced his original 8 of clubs above the ace and discarded the 8.
Ah, I was not the only one to get lucky this round. What a find!
He grinned at his mentor, and his mentor grinned back before drawing his card.
Ah, lovely, a 2.
He slipped the 2 of cards in the bottom right-hand corner, flipping up the card he was replacing.
Oh dear.
Izuku sat up straight, looking to see it was another 4. The 4 of spades. He quickly grabbed it from the discard pile and placed his 6 with it in the bottom middle. He grinned at his mentor.
Better not next time, Nedzu.
Nedzu chuckled.
Oh, you, the game isn't over yet.
They played several more games of 6, as it was called, and Izuku found himself enjoying it. Knowing what cards were left, running probabilities, and weighing risk and reward to see if you wanted to flip up that final card, ending the round was incredibly exciting. After all, you didn't have to have a low score, just lower than your opponent. Still, the game was mostly luck with a healthy dash of strategy, so Izuku found their win-loss ratio to be about 1-to-1, which was certainly rather fun to think about. He did end up winning that first game. The combination of the 2 -4s was too much for Nedzu to overcome, even with only 2 cards actually giving him any points by the end. 9 was still much higher than 3, after all. The next lesson they had that day was finally on some of the psychology principles that Izuku could use in everyday life. Nedzu called them the tactics of persuasion, which really meant that you could use them to influence how people thought and get them to see your side better. There were, of course, different types of arguments, how each one appealed to the emotional or logical side of your brain. There were also tactics like distraction that were simply fascinating. Apparently, the logic side of your brain, or System 2, the slow thinking system, could only hold so many pieces of information at once before it became overwhelmed. On the other hand, System 1, the fast-thinking emotional and intuitive side, was rather automatic and thus didn't need to hold information. They had studied this before quirks, apparently, in a way that seemed really simple and probably easy to recreate. So that's what Izuku did, and Nedzu more than happy to enlist Aizawa's hero class into it. So, with Lunch Rush on board for the reward, Izuku went to work. He poked his head in the door. Hello? The students, previously in a study period, looked up at the young voice, and Izuku shrank a bit under the 20 eyes that were suddenly on him. But Aizawa managed to save him. Izuku, what are you doing here?
Oh, I'm doing an experiment for Nedzu. He said your class was free this block and could help me.
Aizawa sighed. What do you need them to do? He brightened, very excited.
It's simple. They'll be given a series of numbers in one room, go to another room, and have to repeat them. That's it.
And how many people do you need for this?
Well, the more we have, the better for the data.
Aizawa sighed again. This is not mandatory. If you want to sit out, you can. The class erupted into excited battle. Izuku heard one person say, "He's so cute! How can you say no to that face?" and blushed.
We've prepared rooms for this. Since we have to do it one at a time, if you want to follow me.
It seemed like the entire class of 20 kids immediately got up to follow him, as he led them into the halls that housed the meeting rooms, with the teacher's lounge and the office where Nedzu was waiting at the end of the hall.
If you could please wait in here, I'll come get you one at a time, if that's all right.
He got a series of confirmations and nodded hesitantly. They were all so much bigger than him, and he was kind of tricking them. Sure, they were going to have to memorize numbers given, but that wasn't technically the thing they were measuring in this experiment. Oh well, he'll tell them after the fact. They took the first student into the meeting room next door and gave them a series of 7 numbers to memorize, giving them a moment before taking them back out and walking down the hall with them. About halfway there, he stopped. "Oh, I almost forgot. As a thanks for participating, Lunch Rush is offering a reward, and we wanted to know if you'd like the cut-up fruit or a slice of cake." They startled, but mumbled "cake" before going back to repeating the numbers under their breath, and Izuku smiled at them before letting them into Nedzu's office, where they repeated the numbers. It was going well. At the end of the experiment, all the students were in the otherwise empty cafeteria, eating cake or fruit. Some of the cake people were looking guilty that they hadn't picked the fruit, since they were hero students and wanted to keep healthy. But he did notice quite a few people guarding their slices against their fruit cup friends. Aizawa was standing against the wall with folded arms, and Nedzu and Izuku compared both who had selected what and who had messed up, if anyone. The results were almost exactly as they should be, with some standard deviations. "So, did you get what you were looking for?" He grinned. "Yes, this definitely proves the theory." One of the kids chuckled. "On who's good in memorization and who isn't? I mean, it was 2 numbers. How hard could it be?" One of his peers looked at him in confusion. "2?" a girl muttered. "But I had 7? Recalls on both sides of the argument, until they realized that they had just had different numbers, and they looked confused at the boy. Izuku blushed and scruffed his heel while grinning. "It was a logical ruse. We were actually testing on how having too much information impacts your decision-making skills. People who only had 2 numbers didn't have as much to focus on, so they were far more likely to pick fruit, the healthy option. But people who had to think about 7 numbers were too distracted and often went with their gut, which was cake, since everyone likes cake." The students looked at each other and down at what they were eating. "He's right. I should have picked the fruit, but I was too busy thinking about the numbers." There were murmurs of agreement, and Aizawa raised an eyebrow beside him. "A logical ruse, huh?" Nedzu chuckled. "I think it was a clever recreation of a previous experiment. And I must say it went rather well, don't you think? Izuku, what lesson can we take from this? If you distract people with too many options, they won't make good decisions." The class sweat dropped at the bright smile on his face when he said it, but Nedzu just patted him on his shoulder. "Quite right. Now, let's get back to the lesson. I would like to teach you about priming before you have to leave for the day." "Yes, Nedzu-sensei!" Aizawa and his students watched his two leave, and his teacher sighed. "God, this is going to be a nightmare." His students silently agreed. Uraraka Ochako was nervous. She was 8 and going to a new school. Her parents were a little worried about moving to the Nostafu area, but with heroes everywhere, they'd be getting more work, so they were willing to make the sacrifice. Plus, the district was safe and had reportedly good schools. She let herself into the classroom, walking in front of the board as the teacher introduced her. She wasn't used to there being this many people in one class, let alone in an area in general, but she was slowly starting to get used to it and not be overwhelmed. "Class, this is Uraraka Ochako. She just moved here. Uraraka, why don't you tell us about yourself?" She stumbled through her introduction, telling them where she was from and how her parents were construction workers, before an angry blonde boy in the back of the room loudly called out, "What's your quirk?" The teacher scolded him for speaking out of term. His name was apparently Bakugo, but he just rolled his eyes. "So, what is it?" She tapped her index fingers to her thumbs and then held her hands out, showing the pink finger pads. "Anything I touch with 5 fingers will float. It's called zero gravity." Some of the class oohed and awed, but the boy Bakugo just sneered and sat back in his seat. She felt a twinge of annoyance go through her. Just who did he think he was? She narrowed her eyes at him and smiled brightly. "And I'm going to be a hero!" Now that got a reaction of him. She giggled as he exploded, quite literally, and the teacher reprimanded him again. No way! I'm gonna be the only person in this school to be a hero. She rolled her eyes, still smiling. We'll see about that, Explody! She trounced to her seat, which happened to be right in front of the boy, who had stilled and blinked at the nickname before scowling and turning away. Whatever, round cheeks. She grinned. Yeah, this was the start of something new. Katsuki didn't know how he felt about round cheeks, but she was sitting in Deku's spot, which meant Deku wasn't coming back. He huffed. Maybe the nerd had finally given up on being a hero? But something didn't sit right with him. Even if he had quit wanting to be a hero, that wouldn't mean he'd have to drop out of school. Did something happen to him? No, Auntie would have told the old hag who would have told him, so he would have known if the nerd had done something stupid. He would have been told if anything had happened, especially if it was serious, right? He slammed the door open and ignored the yell from his mom. Oi, hag! Where the hell is Deku? Oh, Zuko? Didn't I tell you? He's getting homeschooled now. He scrunched up his brow. Homeschooled? But Auntie works and isn't a teacher. Oh yeah, apparently he has a private tutor. Inka was really happy about it. They took an interest in our little Izuku, and now he's having a lot of fun, last I heard. Fun? Private tutor? The nerd was trying to get ahead. And as if Deku could catch someone's eyes with his shitty, creepy notebooks and god-awful muttering. So something clearly wasn't right here. Katsuki was missing something. He just didn't know what, but by all might he was going to figure it out. Oh, just so you guys know, that is a real science experiment. It's one of my favorite ones I've ever heard. I love psychological experiments. Chapter 5. A Visit to the Park. Izuku woke up one morning to an email from Nedzu. Dear Izuku, I am rather busy today with some nonsense from the commission. So for your lesson today, please read the following articles and case studies, watching any attached videos. There are 4 links here to case studies about something called the foot in the door and the door in the face principles of psychological study. If you want to actually read the articles, I highly recommend it. Go to the Zutopia fic and click the links. I personally love psychological stuff, but that's up to you. Back to the fic. I should be free around our old playtime if you would like to play Terraforming Mars. Smile. Nedzu. Signing his email with a smile was certainly unconventional, but it did seem in line with Nedzu's personality. So Izuku just smiled back to himself and went to click on the first link. Ah, so that's what he was learning about today. This should be interesting. He took a lot of notes and was a little daunted by the small text on the last link. So, since it was past lunchtime anyway, he figured he'd take a break. Eat something. Maybe play outside to stretch his legs and get some sunshine. Plus, his mom was still out. I love you, Izuku. Please make sure you eat and don't spend all day on your computer. And he was hungry, so best relax for a bit. He only had one more article, a scholarly one at that, and he felt like he had a pretty good grasp on the 3 techniques of compliance. He got to learn so many cool things with Nedzu. All the psychology and neuroscience things were so interesting. Way cooler than the regular math and English and literature he usually did in school. He made himself a simple sandwich, not wanting to bother with cooking quite yet, and sat by the window to eat it, opening it and letting the fresh air wash over him. When he was done eating, he sat by the front of the window for a little bit more, just breathing in the air, until he was suddenly overtaken by a feeling of not enough and a desire to do more. That sent him running for the door, pulling on his red shoes before locking it behind him, slipping the key back in its hiding spot, taped to the side of the door, the side away from the stairs. He bounded down the stairs, gleefully running into the park across the street with a giggle. No one else was out at this time, regular school still in session for quite a while by his estimates, so he definitely had the park all to himself from the other children, except the really young ones who didn't go to school yet. Many of his neighbors had already been told by a gushing Inko that he was getting homeschooled, so no one questioned why he was out and not in school, simply sending him smiles and going back to their jogging, minding kids, reading, or whatever else it was they were doing in the park on this genuinely beautiful day. It was his favorite type of weather. He thought as he ran around, climbing trees and sliding down the slide. With the warm glow of the sun and a gentle breeze, it was the perfect temperature for being outside, and Izuku was loving it. After who knows how long, he flopped onto the grass to watch the puffy white clouds drift by. He was so relaxed he didn't notice when he slipped into an easy sleep. It really was the perfect day. He woke with a start, body instantly rigid and heart pounding for reasons unknown. What had woken him up in such a state? He didn't remember any dreams. Deku! Ah, he thought to the pop of explosions. That was why. He scrambled to his feet as the blonde approached with a brown-haired girl chasing after him, looking a little mad, but Kacchan ignored her completely. School must have let out while he was napping. He had really wanted to avoid Kacchan if at all possible. Shitty Deku, where the fuck have you been? He winced at the swears coming out of an 8-year-old's mouth. In general? Or... Kacchan stopped a few feet from him, popping off explosions threateningly. The hag says you're homeschooled now. Some private tutor or some shit. But we both know that's bullshit. No way someone as useless like you got the eye of a private tutor. Just then, the girl caught up. Oh my god, Explodey, learn to chill! She stood straighter, and annoyance slipped off her face as she turned to Izuku with a bright smile. Hi there! I'm Uraraka Ochako. What's your name? Kacchan clicked his tongue. Fuck off, round cheeks! We're having a conversation! She rolled her eyes. Yeah, and I want to be introduced to the green kid. Now can you butt out? She turned back to Izuku, smiling expectantly. He opened his mouth to reply, but Kacchan sneered. Didn't you hear me? This is Deku. He's quirkless. He wilted, looking away from the girl. Oh, neat. Don't see many of those. Nice to meet you, Deku. Izuku blinked, startled, but saw no malice on her face. Just a toothy grin. She was missing one of her 2 front teeth, he noted idly. Kacchan rolled his eyes. Whatever, you've been introduced. Back to the important conversation. Why the fuck aren't you in school? Round Cheeks took your spot, so I know you're not coming back. He blinked at Uraraka. She had taken his spot? Oh, she must be new then. A transfer? Living in a new place can always be hard. He hoped she was adjusting well. He cleared his throat, knowing Kacchan wouldn't like to be kept waiting. No, that's right. I'm being homeschooled. By fucking who? Izuku was reluctant to tell the truth. Sure, it was the truth, and it was a really cool truth at that. But the chances of him being believed were slim, and Kacchan didn't like it when he thought Izuku was lying, and then he'd come home with bruises and burns. Kacchan? How many times do I have to tell you? Don't fucking call me that! He blinked. Then what should I call you? Kacchan stopped and scowled, thinking. Izuku pressed on. Should I call you Katsuki, since we've known each other for so long? Or maybe Bakugo, 'cause you don't like me? Kacchan grimaced. Do not call me Bakugo. God, it sounds weird hearing that in your whiny voice. So, Katsuki then? He grimaced once more. No, that also sounds wrong. Fuck! He clenched his teeth, clearly lost in thought before sighing and scowling. Fuck! Fine, just call me Kacchan, you useless nerd. Izuku blinked in surprise. Are you sure? Yes, I wouldn't have said it if I wasn't. Okay then, Kacchan. Vaughn didn't explode like he usually did, and Izuku relaxed minutely. Wow, the girl said. You really tamed the beast, huh? He wants you to call him by that cutesy nickname. I don't want shit! I've just heard it for so long, anything else sounds wrong! Shut the fuck up, round cheeks! She merely giggled and danced out of the way of his explosions, leaving Izuku staring in awe. She was so confident. If anyone had tamed the beast, it definitely wasn't Izuku. He blinked. Wait, what time is it? How long ago did school let out? Uraraka turned back, ducking under a swipe. Not too long. Maybe 5 minutes ago? We came right here. Why? He blanched. Oh no! I'm gonna be late! It was nice meeting you, Uraraka! She giggled. You too, Deku! Maybe we can play outside again another time! Kachan growled and yelled, but Izuku was already running. She seemed nice. He was, in fact, a little bit late, but when he told Nedzu about what had happened at the park and possibly making a friend, he was more than understanding. I see today's lesson is already sticking. Greenbean, what did you mean? Redacted, did you not know? Redacted, you used the door in your face technique. Redacted, he presented him with the undesirable options until he had no choice but to accept the nickname he previously despised. Redacted, it wasn't a perfect representation, of course, but it was masterfully done. Redacted, he did end up complying, did he not? Greenbean, I guess you're right. Greenbean, Greenbean, also, I'm sorry, but I haven't read the last link yet. I took a break and ended up napping outside before Kachan found me. Redacted, quite all right. That was merely a comparison essay with some experiments detailed within. Redacted, as long as you understand the topic, I see no reason why you would have to read it. Redacted, besides, it is very small text and not very interesting besides. Smiley. Greenbean, are you sure? Redacted, quite. Now, I must apologize for this, but I'm afraid several of your plants are about to burn up. Greenbean, no, not the asteroid. Frown. Greenbean, I will have my revenge. Redacted, I'm looking forward to it. Smiley. The next week wasn't as eventful as that one day in the park. The weather was still nice, so he did spend his lunch breaks there, but he was careful not to linger too long, not wanting to be caught by Kachan or even Uraraka, no matter how nice she had seemed. He was at the store with his mother on Saturday, a day they both had off, except for scheduled gaming time, of course. So they liked to shop together, getting in all the time together that they could. Their relationship had greatly improved since Izuku had started working with Nedzu a few weeks ago. She had always treated him a little like a porcelain doll, but now, with his new confidence, she was finally treating him more like just another little boy. He was capable, and she knew that now. It had been practically shoved in her face with the actual principal of UA, the smartest mammal in the area, coming and proclaiming it. Plus, she no longer had to worry about him getting bullied at school, since he was getting tutored on UA grounds, and there was no way Nedzu was going to let anything happen to his student. It would probably be grounds for instant expulsion, what with how fond he was of the boy. Still, the weekly grocery runs were something they both looked forward to. A nice way to conclude an otherwise busy week of work and school. She hummed to herself, maybe we should buy a watermelon. Actually, he perked up, that's probably the priming talking. I noticed a sign for watermelon at the front of the store, so it was recently in your mind. Do we have watermelon on the list? She blinked, jacking the paper before chuckling and ruffling his hair. No, we don't, but still, even if I'm being primed. Tomorrow is supposed to be really warm, perfect for a watermelon treat. What do you say, Izuku? He tilted his head, looking very serious as he considered, and his mother couldn't help but laugh quietly to himself. He came to a decision and smiled brightly at her. Okay. Oh, hey, it's Deku! His head shot up with a slight flinch, but the voice was feminine, so he was able to relax. He took in pink cheeks and brown hair before he smiled and waved. Hi, Uraraka! The man and the woman came up behind the beaming girl, and the man chortled heartily. Chaco, is this your new friend, the loud explosive one? She snorted. No way! This is Deku! I met him in the park the other day. But he is friends with Explodey, I think. Inko blinked and broke into a smile herself. Izuku, is this the girl you were telling me about? Oh, she cooed. He could feel himself getting red. He was talking so much about how cool she was, handling Katsuki the way she did. The Urarakas, was it? The woman smiled genially. Hello, yes, we're the Urarakas. Our daughter Ochako recently joined the local elementary school. Are they classmates? Oh, no. Inko shook her head. He's homeschooled. He was in the park the other day when school let out. That's how they met. I'm Midoriya Inko. It's nice to meet you. The adults talked. Uraraka came up to him with a frown. Is your name not really Deku? She whispered. Because I noticed your mom called you Izuku. Yeah, he squeaked out. It's another reading of my name. It means useless. Kachan came up with it. He trailed off, looking away, embarrassed. Her face puffed up in indignation. Now that's just mean. I'm sorry for calling you that earlier. I didn't know what it meant. No, he shook his hands rapidly. It's not your fault. I didn't officially introduce myself the other day, even though you're totally new to this area and just moved here. She cocked her head. Oh, how'd you guess? I didn't think it came up. Crap, that's right. She hadn't. His heart was beating rapidly in nervousness. I just guessed. School only started recently, sure, but Kachan said you took my spot, so you were either a transfer from another school or you just moved here. I figured Aldera is a pretty small school, and if you hadn't heard of me or Kachan, it was probably the latter. She blinked, then smiled again. Oh, yeah, that makes sense. You're pretty smart, Midori. He flushed at the nickname, and she looked panicked. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know what to call you. Midori is weird because your mom is here, and I'm not going to call you Deku. Plus, I don't think we're familiar enough for me to call you Izuku, you know? He nodded and starts, still trying to comprehend that a girl and his maybe friend had given him a nickname, one that wasn't even hurtful. Plus, she giggled, you are rather green. That drew the adults back into the conversation, all of them laughing. Inko put a hand to her face, smiling at him. Yes, I'm afraid Zuko got my coloration in all respects, but he did get his father's curls, so I don't have quite a carbon copy. Uraraka's mom laughed. You do look remarkably similar. No one would doubt he's your son, Inko. The short woman hemmed and hawed for a moment before her face brightened. Oh, you folks just moved in, right? Why don't you come over for dinner tomorrow? I would love to get to know you, impart my wisdom of the area. Plus, Izuku would no doubt love to have Ochako over. Isn't that right, son? He blinked, glancing at the girl, then beamed. Yeah, that is if you want to. Uraraka bounded back to her parents with wide eyes. Please? Explodey probably isn't going to invite me over any time soon, and I have no other friends yet. They quickly agreed, chuckling all around, before Inko gave them the address and the time. They all peeled off to do their own shopping. Izuku, his mom said as they approached the produce section, let's pick up 2 watermelons. He sighed good-naturedly and put 2 watermelons in the cart. Drawn in by the priming, Mom. She just laughed, and he couldn't help but giggle, too. All right, Nibblings, I hope you enjoyed this first part and first 5 chapters of Zutopia by Itslivybear. I'm really glad to get back to recording and really glad to get back to enjoying this stuff with you guys. So glad to be back on my feet. Love you, Nibblings. It has been Buggy Cash, your coffee aunt, and please check out Eleanor Elizabeth's Discord server because that is where you can find me. Check out Eleanor Elizabeth's YouTube channel because Goddess Nibbling deserves all the respect. Check out Rat Overlord because number 2 Nibbling deserves all the respect. And check out Cowl because let's face it, they were my first inspiration. Love you, Inspiration Nibbling. Let's keep it up. Goodbye, guys. See you later. Welcome to the blooper reel. More clips of me being silly. Bye. One such game he was rather fondum? Jesus Christ, Bug. Luckily, Inka was lovely, if a bit overwhelmed by virtue of being a single Helen... That was not a fucking word! Nedzu had given him a pass that wouldn't... lock so that blah 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 blah. Fucking mouth work. You must flip over one of your cards, whether you are ready or not, my friend. Ah, fuck, that was not what I said. Redacted. He didn't let him but comply, did he not? That was fucked up. What the fuck, have I been recording this on the wrong spot? My voice when I record on the blooper side.